Time out. Pause.
Let's not spend, people. Just stop spending.
Think about increasing the value of a business, top line growth versus margin expansion, and those trade-offs. And so, Anastasia, maybe start with you. Like, what are your thoughts when you hear this topic? I'm sure you hear it every year, every quarter.
Growth is the lifeblood of SaaS companies. It's like being on a thrilling roller coaster, right? It's not just about the speed, it's the momentum. And sustained growth attracts investment, it fuels innovation, it captures market share. But of course, you can't just focus on growth. And if you are throwing margin out of the window, it's not going to sustain you in the long term. So you need to consider the costs, the customer acquisition and retention. But I think as a conversation starter, I would argue for focusing on growth if you are in the SaaS business.
Yeah, and I appreciate you're hedging your bets here on this too, because it is, I think we all know this is a false debate as it relates to debate, but it's the framework of which ones we think about. So this isn't pigeonholing you and branding you in a corner of I'm growth versus margin. So just to throw that out there, I think it is worth noting, one point I'll extract from what Anastasia just mentioned also, I would summarize is growth allows you to live and fight another day. In other words, right, it buys you that window of time to start to become more interesting, even as a company, more interesting to acquire than to squish from a competitive standpoint. So one category, and Peter, you probably, I don't know if you ever took debate, I did not, clearly, but sometimes here's a topic you want to take that position. I would actually say, rather than necessarily taking the opposing view, do you share that point of view, Peter? And then if so or if not, how do you also think about margin?
No, that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm here for. I'll do dissent.
You're here because you picked
I'll
up
do
the phone.
dissent. My opinion doesn't matter. I'm here to fight. So that's what we're going to do. I say GIF, not GIF. I have no problem being the minority opinion. So we're good on that front. So what am I defending here? I'm defending margin. Margin growth, though. Margin growth. So we keep using growth as if just bringing on more customers as if they were Pokemon is growth, and that's not true. Growth of margin is also true. It all chases down to profitability. Who's going to invest in a loser? Sure, you're bringing on more customers. That's great. You get the brand recognition. You got the public profile. That will take you to a certain point. You get tickets. You get top line revenue in growth. And sure, that can get you to unicorn status on evaluation. Yay. I mean, we're still at vanity. We're still going broke. You'd made the statement about living to fight another day. I don't believe top line growth gets you to that point. I believe expansion, renewals, partnerships, those types of things are what gets you there. One of my favorite authors, aside from the people that are also on my screen right now, because I know Justin's sensitive, is Kenneth Ward. And he professes you don't have a customer until the second time they buy. And I'm a believer in that. If you can't get them to just buy the same thing a second time around, it doesn't matter how much net new you're bringing, especially because SaaS companies at large right now don't care about customer acquisition costs. It's very clear they don't. They're making cuts in areas that don't make sense, like layoffs, and not worrying about customer acquisition costs. And maybe I'm defending this as somebody in product-led growth that believes in using the product to defeat an educational inbound, which starts marketing middle of funnel or even bottom of funnel. I hate using terms like that. But anyway, I'm huge on margin. I have many mistakes. One of my top 3 big mistakes as an entrepreneur was not maximizing a market while I was in it before I brought on a new one. And in the case of that business, it was just opening offices in another city and bringing on a new workforce, where that funding would have been better used in remarketing, in retargeting, in upselling the base I already had. That burn, we apply for jobs, we bring on clients, we're looking at investments, we always ask about runway. We have to start building our own runway. We have to get to profitability. The metrics that are used now are truly vanity. And I don't know where the end game from that is acquisition. So it's just funny money altogether, but you're not paying your bills. You're living to fight another day by getting somebody else to loan you money or buy a piece of what you've got. So I'll defend margin.
Some of the ways you continue to grow top line, but you can expand the margin. And by margin, let me just use Charlie Munger, God rest his soul, just passed away this last year, just 2 months short of his 100th birthday. I'm a big fan of the way Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett have thought about long-term investing. Doesn't apply to tech, it seems like. But he mentioned that he believes that EBITDA is a scam because you're reducing your biggest costs and saying we're pretending what we're earning. But let's talk about what typically people are looking at EBITDA as a margin, whatever number you want to use for it. How do you keep top line growing, or at least maintaining? What are tactics for margin expansion in 4 to 6 quarters?
See, this is where we get away from that fixed cost argument. This is also where I'm not a big fan of chasing growth by adding headcount, adding SKUs, adding territories, because you're right, there's a fixed cost. There's a front-loaded cost, and then there's that maintenance cost. So I guess there's an inverse tactic. Don't do the bad thing and you're automatically increasing margin. There's one, and that might be a cheat on my part.
You want to pull on that thread though, because that's really interesting. What I'm hearing you say, if I heard this right, is you're not optimizing just for this window of time, right? Set yourself up for the future optionality by not being locked into more permanent decisions. Am I reading that right?
Exactly. Because it's going to chase you forever. Because there's even cleanup. If you decide to unwind a decision, how does that look? Like what is the expense of that? Do you keep a product around legacy indefinitely because somebody signed a contract for 20 years? Do you rebate them? Do you refund them? Like, how does that work? You sell off that product. Like it's just messy. It's just sloppy. And most of us, myself included, don't plan for it properly. We look at like shiny new. Anyway, you want to talk about tactics on margin increasing endeavors. We need to think of the size of the organization. We need to think about what the organization does. SaaS is a huge space, especially now that we've entered AI, low code, no code, all that stuff being in play. It's super simple to be a solopreneur and do $1 million MRR. You don't have to just own plentyoffish.com anymore. Like that used to be the dream. One dude pulled it off. But now anybody can do it, and none of us have an excuse not to do it. So if we're looking at an organization of that size, it's your guerrilla tactics, it's your disrupts, it's your not being a category creator, but being a fast follower, or being really good at one specific thing. That's the reason people buy the big bloatware, that they do a hard downgrade universally across everything so they have something that checks all the boxes. We're going to see a shift back towards specialized products. Now, we all complain about tech debt and our stack being too big. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. So being good at what you do, being great at what you do, and focusing. Partnerships. Founder-led sales sucks. It's hard. It's the biggest distraction out there. When you're selling, you're not working. When you're working, you're not selling. It's impossible to measure that tide. So when you establish managed service partners, a managed service offering, global systems integrators, all these strategic partnerships, alliances, marketplace listings, those are high margin, usually zero effort outside of some enablement, maybe some co-marketing, maybe a little bit of training, that carry a higher margin than doing it internally. Letting your product speak for you. These are for any size organization. This is a big reason I'm a fan of product-led growth. Mm-hmm. You're defeating this educational inbound.
In terms of communicating that to the team, you need to get the team involved in the process. So I think one of the best ways to overcome any internal resistance, if people are used to crazy budgets and fun marketing programs and a lot of growth, and suddenly you need to buckle up for the times ahead of you. You need to get the teams involved in the strategy development process, ask their opinion, get them on board, and communicate and explain your position, but also solicit feedback, right? Once they're fully involved in the process and vested in it, they would be a lot more eager to carry the flag through their teams and organizations. And of course, having the CEO and the leadership team on board and not arguing over this, but being a unified front and communicating that throughout their teams is critical and most important. So good old hands with the CEO waving the flag and explaining the strategy, and then their leaders supporting him. And I think you might have a winning situation.
Great. Before I go, Peter, over to you, we're going to go back into debate mode as we wrap this up, where you're going to go head to head. So, but I want to, on that same thread, Peter, on the communication part, go ahead.
I'm happy you jumped into automotive, and I'm going to skip the whole Tesla thing because that was delivery delays and holding on to people's money and skirting the law and bending every rule, not really innovating, just being bad. Anyway, I'll throw tomatoes at me, people. I don't care. I'll make the argument. You had mentioned that the people don't matter. Those aren't your exact words, and I'm not quoting you, but all of our job titles have a parentheses after it with overhead contained within it. We always make these arguments about, family or mission-driven, aligned. I think the days of executives jumping on stage and screaming and people caring about logo t-shirts, that's dead. That's gone. Executive leadership has lost that trust. They've lost that energy with people. People have learned to look out for themselves. They've learned to be passionate about what their specific role is. That's why this personal brand movement has been so big, because people love what they do, not necessarily their job. There's a big difference there. But automotive, and some of my biggest wins were in automotive, some of the biggest brands in the world. It's the only industry I've worked in where sales, marketing, and customer success worked in lockstep, got along, and talked. And it was because the overhead parentheses didn't exist. Every role was crucial. Didn't matter if you were polishing wheels or doing deliveries on $300,000 cars, you were just as critical. And the communication was required. And the store had goals. Bonuses were bonuses. They weren't nonuses. OTE wasn't just some sort of filler number. It still isn't in that industry. Now, granted, people are very disposable in that space, especially if you're in sales. They bring in young kids, they make them work their list. They sell their mom and their grandma and some cousin cars because that's the only people they can, and then they exhaust their list and they're out the door and the dealership makes their money. I'm not defending that industry, but the mechanism of understanding all the other teams, understanding you're not in competition with them. The jokes about sales hating marketing really falls to SaaS. That's not every industry. It's just SaaS. That's why we're all so used to hearing it. Knowing what the other person does, knowing why it's valuable, knowing what you bring to it, that's huge. And that's what leadership needs to start putting into play. Not mission goals, not company revenue objectives, not anything like that, but like enjoying your job, innovating, doing the stuff that we can be passionate about on a ground level. That's how we communicate that growth. Now, if the collateral effect is the execs getting what they want, then sure, dangle the carrot and puppeteer, and we'll all be happy because we're doing the part of the role that fulfills us.